Welcome back to another episode of Building Up Your Business, the podcast. I'm Erica Dill with Operationally Up, your hostess with the mostest. And I'm excited about today's episode because we're going to talk about all about saving money. Who doesn't want to be doing that? So Brad Burch has been 6 years of business networking experience and over 7 years in financial services. And now he is the Regional Vice President of Business Link Solutions, where they specialize in helping companies strategize to reduce tax liability for small and closely held businesses. Brad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Erica. Thanks for giving me the opportunity today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm specifically excited because in the consumer goods world, when we're talking to founders and owners and entrepreneurs, they always want to learn about how to save money. And I think the biggest gap that people are missing is how to take advantage of that R&D tax credit. So that's why Brad's here today, because he's going to be giving us all the tips and tricks about how to use and when to use, and even some of those obscure things that you don't think could be in the tax credit can actually be included. And I am sure that I'm even going to learn something because my knowledge on this topic is somewhat limited. So I'll be learning along right there with you. So let's kind of dig into our pro for the day, Brad. So if I understand the topic correctly, you're saying that you can actually save companies a larger amount of money than they probably think by using the R&D tax credit.
Absolutely. It's amazing how many companies out there qualify or potentially qualify for this credit, and they have no idea. They have no idea that they've been able to do it all along. So it's something that I can help them take a closer look at.
And when you say all along, you can actually somewhat go retroactive, if I understand.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't go all the way back to 1981 when this was introduced as a bill in Congress. A little history, if I may. Back in 1981, it was like deja vu all over again. Only the boogeyman back then wasn't China. China wasn't going to overtake us and become the number one economy in the world. It was Japan back then, and everyone had heightened paranoia about that. And rightly so, because Japan was really excelling. They were taking off in many sectors: automobiles, electronics, technology. So there was a malaise in the economy going on over here simultaneously. So Congress put together this, what today would be called a stimulus package. I forget the nomenclature back then. But they put together this proposed very generous 25% tax credit to incentivize U.S.-based manufacturers. At the time, it was strictly manufacturers. To be innovative, to be creative, and more importantly, create jobs here on shore. Now, it was never meant to be a permanent part of the tax code, but it was so successful. Get this, it was so successful it continued to get renewed year after year after year. It got expanded through successive administrations. The entirety of Western Europe has copied our R&D tax credit. With the exception of Belgium. I don't know why they haven't come on board. Many countries across the world have adopted this. So unfortunately, when we're assessing a company, the only years we can go back and possibly recoup or recover potential tax credits, it's a 3-year look back. In other words, they're open years, they're open tax years. We could go back and possibly recapture those credits, which their accountant or their CPA can easily amend those returns and put those credits on the books and utilize them possibly right away or even carry them forward up to 20 years on the books. There's a lot of flexibility built in and into how these can be applied.
So you can get really creative with how these are applied, and especially going back into 3 years and what you're looking at.
Yeah, so for a long time, my business model was to go get refunds on those past 3 years. I got to tell you, Erica, it was a really sexy story for me to go to a small business and say, hey, you left all this money on the table. When you filed your taxes, you left that with Uncle Sam, and that could have been your money. So what we did was we would not just quantify the credits, we would go back and file them for them. Through the years, what we figured out was it really wasn't, we weren't the best determinant of how to apply or use those taxes. So what we did was we changed our model, and now what we do is we provide the model, the study, the quantified credits to back up to meet all the requirements of the taxing authority, the IRS, or the taxing authority in the state, if they happen to be in a state that also offers R&D credits, which 38 of them do. They have mirror programs. The one in California is very generous, where I'm sitting right now. But what we do now is we work with the clients. We provide them the comprehensive study and all the guidelines on how to apply the credits, and then they can decide with their tax preparer the best way to apply those, whether it's in retro or current tax liability or future tax liability. The CPA, the tax planner working with that company, has a bigger picture of where they stand right now. And this came about because we would have CPAs come back to us after we crossed the finish line and the client got big refund checks for the prior 3 years. And the CPA would come back to us and say, hey, I really appreciate you got our client this money, but I would have used those credits differently. He didn't need the money. Yeah, he didn't need the money. What he needed was he needed to, take care of this year's taxes. Okay. So it came out to be a good thing because we can charge less when we're not amending and we're not, doing all the follow up on that. And we can put that study in the hands of the tax preparer, and they can make the best decisions on how to apply those credits. But I do want to point out the flexibility. If they still wanted to go back and capture refunds, they can certainly do that. If they wanted to apply it to current year tax liability, they can do that. And again, they can bank these credits. They can keep them on the books for up to 20 years. So if future tax liability is an issue, they'll have them on hand for that.
Wow, that is a lot of flexibility and quite a secret weapon in your pocket there. And so you specialize in small businesses, helping them do that. What size companies are we talking? Do they have to be a certain size to take advantage of this? What do can they be tiny? Can they be massive?
So the sweet spot is, I'm going to say 2 to 10 million in annual revenue. Okay. The law was originally implemented to get the small business going, to help the small business, to incentivize them to grow. Okay. Now that's not to say that large companies don't take advantage of this. I guarantee you. Let's take Amazon as an example. Everyone thinks Amazon is a retailer, but anyone in the know knows that Amazon is a cloud services company, okay? And what does that require? That requires a huge investment in technology. They have server farms. They have a lot of technology, and their back end that they've developed is the real moneymaker for them. You may or may not know. Again, I'm just using Amazon as an example. I'm not singling them out or picking on them. But a lot of people point out, well, Amazon didn't pay any federal income tax the first 9 years they existed. Well, I guarantee you a lot of that was because they were taking R&D tax credits and using that and applying that to again wipe out any potential income tax liability that they would have had in those years.
Gotcha. And you said it was originally designed for manufacturers, but obviously if you're using Amazon as an example, now it's almost industry agnostic, or are there still certain industries?
Yeah, so under George W. Bush in 2004, this law got expanded. And I want to also give props to President Obama. He made it a permanent part of the tax code in 2015. But in 2004, the bar was reset. So, and it was expanded, and so smaller pass-through entities could take advantage of this. So here's the bar today. Prior to 2004, you had to discover knowledge that was new to the world. Okay, so that's a pretty high bar. But now, if you as the business or the business operator owner, if you're making an investment into new technologies or new products or new services or new methodologies, new ways of operating, in other words, a better mousetrap, and there's any kind of science, one of the hard sciences involved, so let's run through those. Engineering, if there's any kind of computer science involved, if there's any kind of biology involved, if there's any kind of physical science involved at all, then that would possibly make those expenditures, partially so at least, qualify for these R&D tax credits. Now, it's not just it's not just expenditures on equipment and materials, although that could come into play. The bulk of these are wages. So when you have staff, or maybe you even as the owner of the company, the majority of your time is focused on deploying and developing these new technologies, new products, new services, new methodologies, then there's a good chance that a lot of the wages that go towards that, again, can be quantified, and these dollar for dollar tax credits can be applied.
Interesting. So hypothetically, there's a fractional COO who does systems and processes updates in a company. Wink, wink. Are we talking that their services to help these companies improve their processes might qualify?
Sure. Most of the credit goes towards W-2 wages, onshore, U.S.-based W-2 wages. But there are credits for contractors. There's even credits for offshore labor. Is nowhere near as generous, and it has to be amortized over a longer amount of time. But again, the bulk of this is, if you're making these, if you're paying people to do this work, there are credits there.
That's well, that's good for some of us to know. So then, what types of, if we're talking let's talk systems, because you're talking about hard sciences. So what if, I own a consumer goods business? Obviously, there's the easy ones of I bought new equipment and now we're manufacturing in a new way or whatever. But what if I'm designing a new product, or what if I'm changing? I guess that's one question, if I'm designing a new product. A secondary question would be, what if I'm changing the way that we do some sort of system, maybe with the way we do R&D, or the way that we do some sort of process within the business?
So, yeah, it's a misconception out there. You have to invent something new or create a new product for this to apply. And nothing could be further from the truth. Modifying or improving existing products or services, that can definitely count. What it's going to come down to was, when you embarked on this process to create a better mousetrap, whether it's a product, service, methodology, was there uncertainty involved? Did you know what the outcome was? Did you have to try different things? Did you, believe it or not, failure is a better metric for this. Did you have to go down a bunch of blind alleys to get to the final product that you were the final output you were trying to come out with? So, and by the way, a side note on that, the activities that could be quantified as R&D, they don't have to lead to profitability. In fact, sometimes, in a lot of cases, not having profitability to show for, and have losses to show for all your investment, is a better metric.
Hence why the failure is actually a better way to show that that you're eligible for the credit.
Yeah, it's not part of the wording of the tax code, but flailing about, that's a
flailing about. If your company is flailing, you might be eligible for a R&D tax credit. Okay.
Right. Now, an obvious one is if you created something so new that you're patenting it. A lot of those costs to create a new, patented process or product, yeah, that can be recaptured as R&D in most cases.
And when you talk about a service or a methodology, is that only outward facing, only to the customer, or can that be internal in their own processes?
Both. Okay. So right now I'm working with a behavioral sciences company. Well, they're more of a therapy company for small children with disabilities. And they've developed in-house a wonderful tracking system to keep track of their treatment plans, not just for their therapists, but also for the families that they treat. But they've also developed a third-party app that goes out to the parents and the families, and they can use that in conjunction with their therapists. So again, the first part of that was internal. The second part of that was external. So it can be both.
Well, I think that is a great example right there about the internal potential here, because if we're talking, obviously our listeners are going to be growing consumer goods businesses, and they're constantly looking ways to build a better internal mousetrap. So how
Right.
can we service our customers better? How can we do what we do better to be more efficient? And believe me, from working in it, there's a lot of floundering. So that way, as they go about that business and those updates of processes, that's can be added as an R&D tax
I
credit.
love the E word. Yeah, if it can make them more efficient, if their goal is to be more profitable, these are all things that can help us quantify that as R&D.
And I'm assuming from just listening to how you describe your services, there are specific ways you talked about, specific ways to document and all. There's specific hoops or documentation methods that these companies will learn from you to put them in place. They can't just go up and say, "Oh yeah, I did this thing back there and it's good to go and let's take it as a credit."
So that's an interesting question. So let me answer that. Remember earlier I used the example of Amazon,
Yeah.
and Amazon probably has amortized or used millions and millions of dollars in tax credits over their lifetime. I guarantee you, Amazon's not my client, so I can almost guarantee you, they have armies of accountants and CPAs and tax attorneys on staff in house on the payroll that make sure that systems are in place and that there's accurate tracking here. Now, here's the interesting thing: the way the tax law is written for the R&D tax credit, the IRS does not expect a small business to have an R&D time clock. Okay. It's
Right,
just not
right.
practical. It's not going to happen. Part of the service that we do is, when we're doing our analysis and our in-depth quantification of all this stuff, we're asking for payroll numbers, and we're asking for, staff who was involved in these projects. And you are allowed to estimate. I guess the best parallel would be like when you file your personal taxes, you have the long form and the short form. Well,
Sure.
smaller businesses can do the short form version to quantify and track R&D expenditures.
So we're not talking that this is going to be a massive burden on a company to qualify
No,
and
that
get
would
these
defeat. Yeah, that would
credits.
defeat the whole purpose. To put that burden on a smaller company. Again, they can't do that. Amazon, to have a few $1 million of payroll devoted to accountants and attorneys, that's a drop in the bucket for them.
Right. Well, and I would hope that it wouldn't be a burden, but I think we all can agree that there are things in the business world that do become a burden, and we have to do them anyways. So it's nice to hear that this is not one of
Well, you
those.
know what? That's what I see my job primarily as being a person to make it not be a burden. So, in the spaces I work in, construction, medical devices, of course, manufacturing and fabrication, over the last 8 to 10 years, we have worked with thousands of companies in this space, and we've got a lot of this systematized, and there are templates. We've got a lot of data sets that we work from. One of the commitments and promises I make to a business owner when they start down this path with me, first of all, to do an initial analysis, I'm not going to charge them or bill them anything, and that's huge. Because again, if you
Yeah.
were a big company and you brought a big four CPA firm in to come in and assess your R&D, possible R&D tax credits, they're going to come in with their army of accountants and they're going to do their due diligence, and they might come up at the end and say, "Whoops, sorry, you don't qualify for R&D tax credits. Here's our bill." And that bill can be a
You get
lot.
nothing, but you still got to pay us.
Yeah, right. So again, to make this as easy as possible, I make a commitment to the business owner from the outset. We're going to do less than an hour of discovery up front to see if this is even worth going to, your free analysis. When we do that free analysis, I promise you it's not going to take any more than 30 more minutes of your time. If there comes back a report that shows there is a there, and we all agree, including you, Mr. Customer, that there's a decent amount of money there and it's worth pursuing, then I can have it to the point where I won't need more than another 30 or 40 minutes of their time to put the final polish on this, so that we can deliver a sound document that has all the backup that the IRS requires to do this. So in all, they're not going to be out of their own time for more than a couple of hours.
Wow, that is not what I expected you to say. I was assuming that this was going to be a process of like over time, and you had to get X number of things, and it was going to take,
Well, don't
dedication from
misunderstand.
different team members.
It's like when you go and you hire an artist to paint your portrait, okay? And he paints your portrait in a couple hours, and he charges you $5,000, and you break that down. Wow, $2,500 an hour to paint my portrait? No, 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 no. What you don't see is the
You're
many
paying for
years of
experience.
study and
Yeah.
practice and preparation to get to the point where they can do that. Well, it's the same with all these tax teams I work with. Again, many years, in some case close to a couple of decades, they put together, again, systems and templates to make this as smooth as possible for the client. So again, from the client's
Gotcha.
point of view, it's a couple of hours of time. On the back
Yeah.
end, there's many, many hours that go into this.
We were actually just talking on a previous podcast where where they said, show me your overnight success, and I'll show you the decades and hard work and experience that went into that overnight success.
Well, there's even another
So,
layer. There's even another layer to all this, Erica. It's a
oh, I'm sure there
moving.
is.
There's a moving. It's a moving target. The IRS is constantly changing their guidelines and
Oh
requirements.
gosh.
So we have to shuck and jive and pivot all the time.
I'm sure it's a constant learning effort, and
Yeah.
that's why us as the businesses are not going to try to do this ourselves.
Yeah, you could,
So
but it would take a ton of time. And like I said, you in the meantime, that mark might have moved, and you might totally miss the target.
might totally miss it. So is there any way that you can give like a ballpark of like if you said, hey, a company is 5 to 10 million, what can they potentially look at saving? Is that even
Yeah, it's going to be a really big ballpark, but on the low end, I will work with, say, a solo practitioner, a doctor, or a dentist, or a therapist, or a chiropractor who has a smallish staff, and maybe their revenues are only $1 to $2 million a year. It's not uncommon for them to qualify for, 20, 50, $60,000 in credits. If you take a mid-level manufacturer,
yeah.
in the $3, $5, $6 million range, I consistently see them coming in, at a couple $100,000 to sometimes approaching
Wow.
$500,000. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's for a business that size.
No.
That's a lot of money.
That's an extreme lot of money.
Yeah.
And really good. I mean, I think that a lot of our listeners are kind of in that ballpark of anywhere from 5 to 25, $30 million in revenue. And so that gives them just an idea of what they could be looking at, which I'm pretty sure they're like, well, we're going to be looking into this tomorrow.
So yeah, when I have
So,
companies that big, and they get back seven figures, I actually prefer working with the small companies. The bigger companies, when they get back $1 million or more, they just kind of yawn and throw the money on the pile. Oh look, more money. But for the smaller company, an infusion of tax credits like that can make the difference between them being profitable this year and not being profitable this
and
year.
not being profitable. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And from what I understand about the tax credit, there is how it's applied is actually very different from like let's say your standard expenses. So like if you're going to go expense something, it's applied very differently.
So that's changed in the last 2 years. Okay, remember I
Okay.
talked about the wonderful moving target we have. This changed in response to a change in the tax law that was implemented for tax year 2022.
Okay.
So we still the credits are the credits, and they can be utilized in the year that they were created. However, there will be expenses in some cases that qualify as R&D expenditures, and under the
Okay.
current environment we're in with the tax code, those expenses now have to be amortized across 5 years. Congress, a lot of people, most of the people in Congress realize that this was a mistake. It's going to de-incentivize companies to do research and development. There was a bill on the floor last year to reverse that back to the old way, where you could write off all the R&D expenditures in the year that they were created. But that got tangled up in the minutia of politics and tied to other things that were completely unrelated, and it got past the Senate in flying colors, but it got killed it got past the House with flying colors, but it was killed in the Senate. So everybody, I think there's an election coming up, isn't there? Everybody's holding their breath now.
Something like that.
Yeah, everybody's holding their breath right now, and nobody's even talking about it. But we expect, the people in this space, the tax professionals, we expect that once this election, no matter the outcome, when it's behind us, this will become front and center again and a priority, and we hope it gets reversed next year.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, and it's a perfect example of what you were talking about earlier with things changing and evolving and having to keep up. So that's a great example of one of these changes. Now, if I'm not mistaken, R&D tax credits are one of the big ways that you help companies, find hidden money. What are some of the other tax credits that our listeners maybe aren't taking advantage of?
Well, there's literally hundreds. There's over 700 different tax credits that are on the books. When I meet initially with a client and go through a short discovery session with them, what I'm looking at is all the ways that they could potentially save on taxes. So I have several strategies. I've been doing R&D the longest, and that's usually how I'm known and that's how I'm introduced. But for example, a lot of times we can look at the corporate entity, the way it's structured, and it's not optimal. I have a brilliant tax attorney on our team, and what he does is he can come in and analyze that, and usually he can restructure the corporate entity in such a way that day one it reduces their tax liability by 20%, sometimes as much as 50%.
Wow.
Now that's a today and moving forward savings. Remember, R&D is a looking back savings. Okay.
Back, yeah.
I have a couple of teams I work with that do cost segregation. In a nutshell, that's just simply accelerated depreciation on a business-owned property. When you're a business and you own a property, whether it's a commercial property, industrial property, or retail property, or even a residential rental property, depending on what type of property it is, it's normally depreciated over 27 to 39 and a half years. Now, what cost segregation allows you to do is look at certain components or pieces of that property. For example, the land that the property sits on, any improvements to that land, the fixtures on that property, the stairs, railings, balconies, some of the infrastructure, HVAC, and that kind of stuff. A lot of times, those components, the depreciation can be accelerated down to as little as 5 years. Now,
Wow.
What that means is, in their current tax year, that can have a huge impact on their taxes that they owe that year. In a lot of cases, it can wipe out the taxes they owe that year, depending on when we get brought to the table and how far into the property they're in, or how long it's been since they've done improvements to that property. I work with a team that does the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. So when you hire certain classes of people that maybe were recently in the military or incarcerated, or maybe they have been on food stamps or assistance of some kind, you as the business owner are in a lot of those cases entitled to tax credits, and it can be a lot of money. It can be up to $6,000 per employee per year. Again, just for hiring those folks. So that's usually if you have a larger workforce and you're hiring from those demographics. I have an incredible payroll benefit that takes advantage of Section 125. In a nutshell, it reduces the FICA matching that the employer has to do to the tune of 7.65% per employee per year. All that means is they're going to reduce their payroll taxes as the employer to the tune of almost $600 per employee per year. That can add up, when you have a lot of employees. But at the same time, they're reducing their employees' payroll tax contributions. So the payroll tax contributions that the employees make go down, and usually they're netting an extra $100, $200 in their paycheck. So they get a raise, and they get this wonderful proactive health rep app. It's awesome. It's the first AI-enabled smartphone app that will manage your health for you, and it's just got so many benefits built into it. It's incredible.
What do on that one? I mean, I don't know who would say no to giving their employees a raise that they don't have to pay for and minimizing their employer payroll taxes. Is there restrictions on applications for that?
It's not that there's a restriction. It's just that the company I work with on that one, they need at least 5 full-time W-2 employees to implement it. So
That's
yeah, that's a lot of
doable for
companies.
most
So,
companies.
and you're right. Once I show this to companies, that they always respond with, "Why would we not do this?" And it is a
Well, that's the thing. I'm
no-brainer.
like, where's the other shoe? Why? How is that like? So between that and the R&D tax credit, they're making money.
Yeah, notice the theme here. Everything that I do comes under the umbrella of let's save that small, closely held business money on their taxes. You know, a lot of them are giving money to Uncle Sam when they don't need to.
That's, I mean, hidden treasure right there. And I think it's fantastic that you're such a great resource for these companies and that they really, I don't know who's not taking advantage of these things, but they really should be.
Yeah. So, like I said, when I sit down with them, I look at the totality of everything, and then I lay out the potential with all of these, and then I say, here's a roadmap. Here's how you should probably get started if you want to get started on this. And all of them involve assessments up front that cost either nothing or some nominal fee just to process the numbers.
So if there's one thing that you want our listeners to take away from the education of tax credits, R&D, what would be that one thing you want the listeners to take away?
So here's how I would sum all this up. There are two tax codes in the United States of America. There is one for the informed, and there is one for the uninformed. Both are perfectly legal, okay? If you overpay taxes to the IRS, they're not going to come knocking on your door and say, "Hey, sorry, you
Hey,
overpaid. Here's your money back."
here's your
Okay?
money back. Yeah.
They just don't do that.
Wow. So you want to be in that informed group, and that's why you want to hit the replay on this podcast episode so that you know what the informed group actually is.
Yeah, hopefully somehow my contact information is attached to all this so we can.
Good, good, good plug. I was just going to say, Brad, if somebody has follow-up questions or wants to pick your brain on anything, where can we find you? LinkedIn, email?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn, Brad Burch, Business Link Solutions. You can message me there. You can message me at Brad Burch. That's no dots, no spaces, no periods. Brad, Burch, at businesslinksolutions.net. I'm easy to find. I'm even easier to talk to. I love to talk to people about this stuff. I like to see their reactions when their eyes are open to all this. And even if it doesn't lead anywhere, when I talk to people about this, even if there's not an application for them, they almost always know somebody that
Yeah.
they want to introduce me to.
That could. Well, we'll put your contact information in the description of this podcast episode so that way if anybody has any questions or wants to get more information, they know how to reach you. I cannot thank you enough for coming on this episode because what a fantastic I learned something for sure. And I'm sure our listeners did as well. So thank you for your time, Brad.
Thank you, Erica. I greatly appreciate the opportunity you've given me today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, listeners, for paying attention and attending one of our podcasts. We do this every 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks there's some new pro who's here to teach you something new. So from bombs to order fulfillment, marketing to taxes, learn the stuff from the pros before you step in it. I'm Erica Dill with Operationally Up, and we hope to see you again soon.